Greetings, fellow K-Leg Scrappers, Rhadamant here. Thank you for tuning in to the first episode of a new series playing Ostranauts. If you would like to skip the game's overview or the details about this series, or even the character setup, please use YouTube chapters. It's a game where you manage life aboard your ship, and beware of the costs of every decision that you make. You scavenge and explore the boneyard, create, build, and customize your ship, hire a crew, and but remember, nothing is more certain than death and taxes. You start off as an illegal, usually massively in debt, having to take out a punitive mortgage on a crappy ship, and every day can be a struggle to survive. So the overarching goal of this series is to improve the starting ship to be a top-of-the-line cruiser, basically to pay it off and keep investing in it. I'll also be reviewing the game mechanics so that this will act as a tutorial, and my character is going to be set up differently than the last time I played. Plus, the entire character design is a bit different, so let's jump into that. Now, while I get into this, I will cover some of the patch notes for the updates from Ostranauts. The last time I played was back in February. It's now almost July. And there's been some key features and changes, and I'll try to cover what those are in due time. All right. Let's see. I don't know how to say my first name. Let's go with a male. I like how... Eric Garrison. That works. I'm not going to change too much about this character. Maybe give myself just a little beard. Wow, we have gray hair? There we go. I look pretty similar to the last one I played, but it's good enough. All right, Eric, let's get into it. So, the medtech takes a glance at her chart and takes a look and sees that we're immunosuppressed, have low bone density, bad blood circulation, etc., because we were born and raised on the weak microgravity of the asteroid that we're essentially on a space station orbiting around. And the first thing we're going to do, so these are our biological parents. One is a shipbreaker from Titan, and the other is an officer on Deimos. So Titan and Deimos are moons of Saturn and Mars, respectively. And we're starting off... I don't think that's my name, but okay. Around 1036 Ganymede. So the first thing I want to do is work on myself. But there's a bunch of different choices here. Seeking Adventure gives you like a random mini-game where you can strike it rich or end up, worse off. I'm not going to be doing that. I'm also not going to be saving money. Working on myself. So this is a very different screen than you may have been familiar with in the past. You can make all your changes all at once rather than one change at a time, and then it recalculates like your age and everything like that. So the first thing I want to do is to get rid of some of my positive traits and take on some negative ones. So I intend to be shy, which means I am uncomfortable around other people, especially strangers. So I'm not likely to have a big crew. It's going to be tough even have one other person as a result. And as a result of taking on shy, I'm going to ditch unfit. So now we are not unfit. And as you can see, there is a calculus over here, or rather, it's pretty simple algebra, where every trait has a time difference. Essentially, the older you get, the more likely you are to have negative health problems. And old age in this game is like 30. So, you essentially don't want to stack your character to the point where you have like horrible health conditions as a result. All right, I also wanted to take Suspicious. It goes with Shy. So not only are we shy, but we are suspicious of strangers. And that should be here. I'm going to get rid of Fragile as a result. And Visually Impaired, getting rid of that as well. I also wanted to take Slow Healer. I don't intend to get hurt very often, so get rid of Slow Healer is fine. We'll get rid of immunosuppressed and insomnia. And now I'm a young adult. As you can see, Eric Garrison has grown into a young adult. Young adult is fine. I just don't want to be like old age or anything like that. Now, micro G hypovolemic is a real problem. It's bad blood circulation, so getting rid of that is important. I'm also going to get rid of sharp hearing and slow metabolism, which were positive traits, which then buys me back 2 years. I know it's weird that you're like essentially gambling with years here, but that's just the way it works. So at this point, total cost is 4 years of self. The last things I want to do is take on some skills. So I was going to take on EVA Suits, which allows us to work on EVA Suits a little bit better, and hacking, because hacking is really annoying to train manually. And as a result, 18-year-old Eric Garrison is going to age up 9 years, and this is the changes that I'm making to my character. So just to recap, we are shy, suspicious, and a slow healer. I did get rid of unfit, fragile, visually impaired, and immunosuppressed. I also got rid of insomniac, micro G hypovolemic, sharp hearing, slow metabolism, and feeble. Which means, given that we've got rid of unfit and feeble, generally in the regular starts, you are both unfit and feeble, and your character like gets winded constantly and can't carry very much. And then we also picked up EVA suit skill and hacking. Done. All right. Now it says this in the details. I am going to pick the first ship I am offered. I am not going to try to game the system or anything. So let's see what we get. It is a TU-76A, basically a salvage tug. That works. Now the thing is, the mortgage on it is almost $1 million. So this is a very expensive ship to pay off. But that's exactly what I intend in this case. Take the ship. Now that we've taken the ship, we are resume ready. Basically, we are ready to start the game as a 28-year-old. And you can see the changes that we've made throughout our life. So, I don't know how we unaged here, but basically you can see that we unaged and then took traits and changes and yada, yada, yada. Then eventually got the ship. Submit. All right, this should look new to most of you. If you haven't played since, this is the in-game tutorial. So this shows all the things that you're going to want to learn as a new player. We've got time controls and objectives and highlightable interactables and so on and so forth. A lot of these are going to be covered in the tutorial that we're going to be thrown into immediately as a new player, but not all of these. And of course, I am going to be covering all the information as well. And if you have a question about the game, feel free to ask in the comments, or rather in the, well, both in the comments and also in the Channel Point Redemption, ask a question about the game, and I'll try to like answer it. So, press space or the triangle play button on the lower right time bar to unpause the world. So you have the time controls over here. You have slow-mo, which is really good if you're trying to make informed decisions during combat. Pause, normal time, fast forward that goes up to 8 speed, and then the super fast forward is not exactly a super fast forward. It's just like an elapse a certain period of time, which is useful if you like want to go to sleep, because instead of watching your character sleep for 8 hours, you just schedule them to sleep and then super fast forward time so they sleep during that 8 hours. Okay, it's unpaused. Next, hold left alt to see the hotkeys and nearby interactable objects. So left alt looks like this, and even in the dark, and let me hold that aside. Even in the dark, we can see that there's a fridge, a sink, a rack, a bed, a bin, a switch. There's some dirty clothing on the ground, so on and so forth. It's kind of like X-ray vision, if you will. And the next objective is to find the switch. So here it is. Switch is right there. And also, if you ever lose your goals, you have a goals tab on the left. Basically, this emulates your PDA. And you can always open up the goals tab, and it wants me to find the interactable switch here. So here we go. Toggle power. And toggling power then issues all the lights are hooked up to the switch. So you toggle the switch, all the lights turn on. All right, click your portrait or press I as in Indigo or India to take a look at your items that you have. Okay. Your overalls are strewn on the ground next to you along with your shoes. You may have to hunt for a second shoe. Going barefoot or wearing a shoe on the wrong foot will give you a footwear debuff. So this is the right foot, the overalls, and the left foot. Shoes are on. Get your pressure suit. So next we have to go to the storage bin and get the pressure suit as well as carry bag. So there's multiple bins in here. There's this bin that's right over the sleeping bag here, and this bin has like dirty cloth and like old rice wine. The bin what we want, which as you can see in the goal, is in this style of rack, which is not a bin. There's like racks and bins. There's different interactables. And if you right click on it, you get this contextual menu, and you can either click inventory or hit 1, which is the corresponding key. All right, and here is our pressure suit, our pressure helmet, and our carry bag. So I'm going to put the carry bag slung around her shoulder. I'm going to take my PDA and put it in my hip pocket, which is in my overalls. I'm not going to put on a pressure suit. 1, because pressure suits don't go over your shoes. And 2, because I don't really need a pressure suit right now. Because we are in an oxygenated environment. Alright, next, it wants me to leave the room, and in order to do that, it wants me to pick up the toolbox that's on the ground. This is important, because without tools, we're really not going to be able to do very much. So picking it up. And then if we take a look, we have the bag on the back slot, and the toolbox in our hands, right? And the toolbox has a soldering iron, a hacksaw, and a screwdriver. The soldering iron has a battery in it. It's a GOT-style battery. There's multiple batteries in the game. And then the hacksaw and the screwdriver are unpowered, meaning they don't require batteries. All right. Goals. Visit your ship. Place the nearby yellow box in your hand slot. Walk through the K-Leg station and board your ship docked at the airlock. So this is K-Leg. K-Leg is here. And my ship is here. The door to K-Leg Station slides open, and you're greeted by the familiar aroma of station vendor fare. Spot prawn stir fry in suya curry, kebab of chicken in a yaji spice rub, Szechuan beef with pink peppercorn. Your head knows that the meat is aquaponic or lab-grown or worse, but your heart tells you that anything prepared by human hands is better than Trencher's chow. Tired-looking spacers circulate between the bunks, the refuel kiosk, and the breaker yard, moving in and out of the gossamer haze of cigarette smoke that is a permanent fixture on the station. The smokes are Sungara Viceroys, the breaker brand of choice. Folks here will chain smoke them unfiltered no matter how many times Yotimiwa execs find them for overworking the CO2 scrubbers. Your new ship is waiting in port, not far from the kiosk hub and scrap shops. Once you find it, you can finally undock from this rock. If you want to strip ships for salvage, you will need all you need is the hand tools you own, but you'll need a welder to start remodeling and repairing hulls. Either way, if you're lucky, you can start making a living, something beyond the corporate-sponsored rat race of breaking ships for daily wage, a life you can call your own. Now, the kicker here is the way that salvage works in this game is you need licenses to do real salvage, and I don't really I'm unlicensed. I have nothing. That's going to make it a little bit tricky. But let's cover what's here on K-Leg Station. We have a scrap vendor. The scrap vendor you do not need a license for to interact with. And let me get rid of that. We have the licensed kiosk, which offers a 24-hour license, a 72-hour license, a 7-day license, a 30-day license, or a 300-day license. At the moment, I have $100. So the 24-hour license is orders of magnitude more expensive than what I can afford. At the scrap dealer, we are able to sell stuff to it regardless. So it's a good way to make the first few bucks before we get licensed. All right, additionally, there is the battery charger for your suits. There is a kiosk for trade goods. There is the fuel refuel. There is the ferry if you want to go to other sections of K-Leg. And the transit's also here as well, to other sections of K-Leg. So the ferry will take you like elsewhere, whereas the transit will take you to other parts of K-Leg. We do have a supplies vendor here. These are food carts, and then everything else is like habitation and CO2 scrubbing and power and stuff like that, other than the few other kiosks, which aren't immediately important. Like, for instance, the real estate broker, which, as you might imagine, real estate in this game is not cheap. Right? It's not like we can really afford that at the moment, but a man can dream. All right, the tutorial wants us to go through the airlocks onto our ship. So, headed down there. And all the other people walking around here, you know, we can right-click them. Like, Otomaka is another shipbreaker who's 35 years old. We've got Noah Estes, who's a shipbreaker. We've got a bartender, and we've got law enforcement officers. If you're looking to hire other people, and of course, at the moment, we shouldn't. We don't have the infrastructure, we don't have the capacity, we don't have the money to pay them. But, you know, hiring other shipbreakers is a really good way to expand your crew. Okay, right-click to open the Mega Tooltip. So right-click any object to open the Mega Tooltip. So if we right-click, let's say, the floor, we have a Mega Tooltip up here where we can right-click repeatedly until it opens up the compartment menu. And the compartment menu will show you that this room is oxygenated with nitrogen, oxygen-nitrogen mix with no carbon dioxide at normal pressure and temperature. Basically, it won't kill us. We don't have to hold our breath or anything like that. All right, next, click the Show More to view... Oh, I just did that. Okay. Press X as an X-ray to view worn-out items. So, our ship is full of trash. Honestly, there's just like trash all over the floor. And it is broken to hell. So we've got literally a broken battery. We've got another broken battery. We've got floor patches. Basically, there was holes in the floors that were like patched up with patch kits. The wall here is patched and poorly. It's about to bust out. We've got a turbo air pump here that's damaged, which is one of the pumps that helps to oxygenate the airlock. Basically, this thing is a hunk of junk, which is exactly, essentially what I wanted. It's a rust bucket. Yeah, precisely. It's got damaged bulkheads. It's got, it's really in rough shape, is all I'm going to say. So it wants me to right-click the nav station and restore it, removing some of the wear and tear. Interestingly, my nav station's actually in freaking really good condition. Like, it's almost 100%. So if we right-click it here, we can see restore. Actually, restore. And we walk up and we give it a little fix. And the speed at which you fix is dependent on a lot of things. It's dependent on your tools, depending on your skill, depending on your mood, depending on your health. But when you have good skills, good mood, good health, good tools, you repair a lot faster. And if you're wondering, things that are in good condition sell better, a lot better. So it's very helpful to repair things before you try to sell it. All right, so it wants me to press X to hide the damage overlay, which is nice because I really don't want to see how rust of a rust bucket this thing is. And then it wants me to right-click the nav station to use it. Zoom in using the mouse and scroll wheel. All right, here we go. So let's cancel the restoration. Hit use on the nav station. And here is the tutorial about nav stations. So there's a lot of them. And this will step you through about how to use all the nav stations. I might not necessarily read this all to you because I'm going to be covering it when I need it. But I can tell you the bare minimum in order to get moving. So click the comms button on the right side to see the comms console. So at the start, and if you ever want the cheat sheet, it's here and you can always click it from down here. But right now, Folk Punk is the name of her ship. That's just fantastic. No notes. It's wonderful. When you are docked with K-Leg. So let's back up a little bit. Ganymede here isn't Ganymede of Jupiter. It's an asteroid that's relatively small, which got caught in the orbit of Earth. So it's an asteroid that orbits the Earth, and we live on a space station that orbits the asteroid that orbits Earth. So if we zoom all the way out here, and we keep zooming out into the world map, we've got the whole solar system here, but there's really not, honestly, a lot happening outside of the boneyard. And the boneyard is what they call the wrecked ships around K-Leg. So all of these little like question mark asterisks are wrecked ships that we can go salvage, albeit illegally because we don't actually have a valid salvage license, but I can't afford one at the moment, so that's moot. All right. What it wants us to do is to switch to the comms console over here. And then it's going to want us to hail K-Leg in this top right button. You talk to K-Leg and then request an undock because we are docked with them. And if we owed them money, like if we were in debt, we wouldn't be able to undock legally. And there we go. I don't owe any money, so we can release the clamps. Clamps are released, and when you release the clamps, it gives you a very gentle back push. So I'm moving backwards from K-Leg at like maybe a meter a second or something. Not very fast. Basically, so you don't just like re-collide with it. So we are undocked and floating in space. Time to get underway. The long button next to the side of the comms here is switching back to the nav. Done. All right, here in the nav screen, it wants us to find a white diamond, which is K-Leg, and target it for more detailed information. So the white diamond is K-Leg port. And now it wants me to tap E as in echo to slightly rotate our ship clockwise. And there we go. As you can see, we have a slight clockwise rotation. And then I can hit Q to counter the clockwise rotation, or honestly, more intelligently, hold R. R is basically like a counter thrust. R is like so we're in space and like nothing is not moving. Everything is moving in relation to everything else. But R is essentially like stop moving in relation to whatever the orbital gravity well is. So in this case, my gravity well is the asteroid Ganymede, 1036 Ganymede. So R is basically like, yo, stop moving in relation to Ganymede, which means also stop rotating. And that's a better way to stop rotating. Rather than having to thrust and thrust and thrust and thrust and try to get it perfect, you can just hold R and stop rotating. All right, done. So tap Q until we counter the rotation. So the spin is stopped. Use rotational controls until the ship is pointing towards K-leg. And here is bearing. I know it's really small if you don't have a big resolution, but what it's asking me to do is to point to K-leg, which is going to be somewhere around 0 or 360. And that is essentially the direction you're facing. So I'm like half a degree off of basically pointing straight at K-leg, which is close enough, it's fine. And now it wants me to calibrate rear thrust. So go backwards to 200 relative velocity. And relative velocity is this line here. So you have relative velocity, which is relative to my target. My target currently is K-leg port. So current target, current TRG is K-leg. I just call it K-leg. And then relative velocity is our velocity compared to K-leg. And we need to reverse backwards up to 200 meters per second. There we go. Rear thrust is done. Next up, it wants me to go upwards to reduce the relative velocity below 10 meters per second again. Done. So we're 9.8. We're like Earth gravity relative velocity. All right, press the D or right arrow to thrust right relative to K-leg. So this is saying, essentially, you can side thrust. Done. And then left thrust to below 100 meters. Done. So thrusters are calibrated. All right, target the closest derelict. So if we zoom out here, the closest derelict is actually basically on top of us. It's this mark here, and it wants me to travel within 5 kilometers of the derelict. So let's explain how to do that. I'm going to rotate so that my bearing is near 0 to it. I'm also on the right side of the screen here going to change my maneuver drive. All of our maneuvers up until this point have been at like 2.9 Gs, which is kind of jarring. So I'm going to reduce this throttle max over here in the bottom right down a bit so that we're not just like boop, 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 you know, but more smooth movements. Because the really high velocity, high acceleration jerking movements causes crashes. Now, here's the thing. As your ship becomes heavier, you're going to need to crank up the velocity or add thrusters. So if I, for instance, go to this derelict and I salvage a whole bunch of crap, I'm going to need to probably change my maneuver drive velocity to accommodate for the added mass. All right, so what we want to do is bring the bearings down to about 0, which means we're essentially pointing straight at it. Done. The relative cross velocity is this one. Cross velocity, if you have two things aiming straight at each other, where they're going to hit, like two arrows going straight at one another, or a head-on collision, if you will, that would be 0 cross velocity. Cross velocity is when there's a misalignment, so you're moving at one another, but you're not totally aligned, so you're not going to hit, you're not, like, perpendicular. And we want to reduce the cross velocity to 0. Basically, we want to come straight in on this derelict here. And I'm also going to reduce my... And there we go. So now we are moving at 100 meters per second towards this derelict. We have virtually no cross velocity, and we're heading straight at it. I would say, normally I would bring my ship up to maybe 150 meters per second, but because it's so close, there's really no need to do it at this point. Basically, this derelict is like sitting on top of K-leg, so it makes my life a lot easier. And we are 5.5 kilometers away. The tutorial says get within 5 kilometers and then slow down until relative velocity is lower than 100 meters per second. Essentially, do not fling yourself at derelicts or you too will become a derelict. Because if you don't have thrusters And the way the thrusters work in this game is as you install thrusters on your ship, the total amount of thrusters that you have installed will help to decelerate you. So if you do have like a crazy amount, like if you build a race ship where you have a very small ship that is covered in thrusters, okay, you might be able to come to a screeching halt really quickly. But I'm on like a really ramshackle tugboat, so I should be really careful about slamming into targets. So here we go. We are almost... There we go. As soon as you're within 5 kilometers of anything that you could potentially crash into, it throws a prox alarm. It's basically saying, yo, wake up, wake up, wake up. On really large ships, if you're not at the helm, it might be actually tricky to get to the helm before you slam into it. But you can hit the clear button to clear the proximity alarm. And then if you want to mute the proximity alarm, which I do not advise, don't do this unless you know what you're doing. You can hit the toggle to mute your prox alarm. The only reason to mute prox alarm is if you are docked at K-Leg and you're doing stuff for a long time and you don't want all the other ships that are parking at K-Leg or parked at wherever you're parked to throw proximity alarms. Because when you're parked at K-Leg and other ships come docking at K-Leg, it will throw proximity alarms and like slow down the game and kind of be annoying. That's like maybe the only use case for the mute. All right, so now it wants me to slow down a little bit. So we're now moving at 95 relative velocity to it rather than 100. And it wants me to match speed. Now, match speed is not a toggle that I usually use. The reason is when you match speed, it's very easy to forget you've done that. And then it's very hard to try to dock with stuff if your ship is constantly trying to match speed, because matching speed is basically don't let me dock. So match speed is not something I typically use, but I'm going to use it in this case for the tutorial, which is here. Or K, as in kilo. So matching speed is essentially throw on the brakes so that I don't slam into this thing, so that we are parked relative to one another. All right, click the comms console button on the right side of the nav console to see the comms controls. And this is basically walking through how to dock with your first derelict. This is not how I do it. So next time when I do it, I'll explain my process, which is a lot less clunky, but maybe requires a little bit more control of the ship. So it wants me to go to the comms console. Done. It wants me to hail the ship, which is this one. This question mark that's only 5.2 kilometers away. There's not going to be a response because it's a derelict, which means then I can initiate the uncontrolled docking procedure. Basically, I'm docking with the derelict. And then in this screen, this is the docking camera. So, the docking port that we have is the big circle, and the docking port they have is the small circle, and we got to line them up like it's Star Wars blasting the vent port. The other thing is, because we are on matched speed, our ship is constantly going to throw on the brakes, which is annoying, so I'm going to turn that off, even though the tutorial might not have told me to. So what I'm going to do in this case is just approach their docking port at, let's say, a very comfortable 30 meters per second. Which in this game, like, most collisions of like under 30 meters per second or so are really just not going to do any damage. Like IRL, 30 meters per second is pretty violent when you're in a car or something. It will be jarring, not fatal, but jarring. In this game, it's like a light love tap. You can think of it that way. Now, if I was flying not in the tutorial, I would probably accelerate much more differently. Actually, this is going to take 100 seconds, so I'm going to go up to 50 meters per second. And you can see the ETA up here. The ETA is how long it will be until you collide. And generally speaking, what I like to do is decelerate when I get to a little bit under 10 seconds, like 8 seconds of ETA or so. And all the while using A and D keys, alpha and delta, to keep lined up on their docking port so that it's a good connection. So we are perfectly lined up, more or less. And then as soon as the ETA drops below 10, which is in the top here, I'm going to start decelerating. And you can also see the range. So we're 700 meters, 600 meters, so on and so forth. All right, doing the deceleration burn. And I'm being overly cautious this time for tutorial sake. In the future, I'm gonna slam things a bit harder. All right, and at this point, the clamps are green. So the clamps go green depending on the size of your target. So on K-Leg, because it's a giant space station, you're able to clamp from much farther away. Large ships allow you to clamp farther away. It's not so much farther away, it's like distance from the core of the ship, you can think of it that way. So if you have a really small ship, you're clamping close. If you have a really big ship, you're clamping far. So you can kind of tell how big the target is depending on how far you are from the clamp when you finally get green. In this case, this derelict is a very small derelict. I can already tell that. But let's go hit clamps. And once you're clamped, you are essentially locked on to the other derelict where the two of you are connected. And if you try to fly around, you could do a lot of damage to your own ship unless you have like a tether, a tow brace, in other words. There is a way for you to tow other ships around on purpose, but without that, any real acceleration will violently rip ships apart because they're really not meant to use the docking as a tow brace. All right. First, derelict. The clamps on your docking ring engage and your hull resonates like a strung gong, or a struck gong. While your sensors scan the vessel for data, you close your eyes and imagine the fortune that could be waiting you on the other side. Perhaps you found a racing skiff, a nimble vessel with a lightweight hull pushed around by a top-of-the-line RCS package, and 4-can Mayara Hydra intake regulators. Doubt it. Or you've stumbled upon a multi-cabin pleasure yacht, an elite catamaran complete with a full bar and corridors adorned with yards of crimson and cream Van Hummel interiors. Also super doubt. Or maybe it's just a dead freighter. Yeah, it's a dead freighter. Actually, this might not even be a freighter. This might just straight up be like a rescue pod or something. A decades-old pseudo hauler packed with trash, sporting a giant hole where the reactor used to be. This is junkyard, after all. Yep, that sounds more. So, I am committing a crime right now. This is technically illegal salvage. And what that means is I have to be very careful about hanging out here, because if I hang out here and cops show up, I got problems. Whatever it is, you've got access to it now, and a bit of time before the IOSEC security goons harass you. Basically, the police. If you're a salvager, maybe you'll smash and grab the rare parts and fence it back a K-leg. Cut whatever you can quickly for a buck. Or with a license, trade a bit of profit for less pressure and more resale reliability. I personally like to be licensed because it makes life a lot easier. If you're a mechanic, you can fix it up, make it fly. Derelicts go for discount at the shipbroker, and any sweat equity you put into them after you buy it is yours to keep. So this is referencing another game mechanic where you can buy the licenses for a derelict, fix it up, and sell it. And that's a really good way to make a lot of money, but I am not going to be able to afford any licenses right now. I'm too poor. If you're an outlaw, you can always just steal it. Now, the thing about outlaws is if you do steal a ship, unless the game mechanics have changed since I last played, there are some disadvantages when the ship isn't your own name. For instance, you can't ferry to it. So in this game, if you ever leave your ship, like let's say I have a crew member and I send the crew member on my ship to somewhere else, and I take a derelict ship back to K-Leg to sell it, if I legally own the ship, I can then ferry back to my ship. If I don't legally own the ship, I cannot ferry back, which means the crew member would have to come and pick me up. So there are some disadvantages to illegal ship ownership, just to let you know. All right, so confirm. All right, before we get in there, we need to put on a pressure suit and shoes. Take off the shoes and put on the suit and helmet. Because if we hit G here, That I don't think is true. It's telling me the other ship is pressurized, which is crazy. Is it really? Well, okay, but either way, we're going to want a pressure suit. So, shoes are off. 1 and 2, pressure suit on. Oh, what was in my overall pockets? Trenchers and a Viceroy cigarette? That's fine. Pressure suit on. The way the pressure suit works is it doesn't have its own supply of oxygen. It's literally just a suit where you seal yourself in like you're a bubble boy, and you will very quickly run out of oxygen. Eventually you get like a proper spacesuit with like batteries and oxygen and CO2 filters. This pressure suit is a hunk of junk, but we're poor as hell. So, you know, that's what we can afford. Helmet on. And then also we want to grab the Hellhound lamp, put in our hands, right click, and toggle power, because derelicts are often very dark. Thank you for tuning in to Ostranauts, which originally streamed live on Twitch. If you have any feedback or questions for me, let me know in the comments below. If you would like to catch a live stream of mine, Rhadamant.com has my stream schedule and countdown timers to upcoming streams. If you'd like to join my online gaming community on Discord, Rhadamant.com has a link to it, as does the description of this video. Thank you so very much for watching. A special thank you to my Twitch subscribers, Patreon patrons, and viewers like you that support the channel and made it all the way to the credits. Thank you so very much. I hope to catch you next episode or an upcoming stream. Farewell, fellow space scrappers.